Ryan Miller, the East Lansing, Michigan native, is one of, if not the best American-born goaltenders in hockey history. The netminder that became a household name during his time with the Buffalo Sabres had an incredibly impressive hockey career. Miller put up unbelievable numbers in college hockey with his hometown Michigan State Spartans, proved himself at the American Hockey League level with the Rochester Americans, and became a Vezina Trophy winner with the Buffalo Sabres, and put together a performance in the 2010 Olympic Winter Games that will be remembered for a very long time. It led to a silver medal for the United States. Before getting drafted by the Sabres in the 5th round, 138th overall in 1999, Ryan Miller played in the North American Hockey League for the Sioux Indians. Although he put up strong numbers in the NAHL in his 2 seasons with the Indians, the league wasn't looked at in the same regard it is currently, which led to many teams passing on Miller in the draft and 16 goalies getting selected before him. His Sioux coach at the time, Joe Shawhan, said that Miller, quote, could have been a 1st or 2nd round pick. But luckily for Buffalo, he slipped all the way to the 5th round and would go down as one of the franchise's biggest draft steals. Miller would go on to have one of the most impressive college hockey careers for a goalie really ever, going 16-4-3 with a 1.36 goals against average his freshman year, then going 31-5-4 with a 1.32 goals against and an unheard of .950 save percentage in year 2. This was good enough to earn him the Hobey Baker Award for Best Player in College Hockey, making him one of 3 goalies to ever win that award in his 44-year history. The next year, he continued his greatness, winning 26 games, posting a .936 save percentage, and he was named CCHA Goalie of the Year for the 3rd straight season, again being a finalist for the Hobey Baker. After the 01-02 season, Miller would leave Michigan State and join the Buffalo Sabres organization. And although he had a standout college career, he was still in a battle with other goaltender prospects, including Martin Biron, who was drafted 16th overall in 1995 by Buffalo, and Mika Norinen, selected 21st in 1997. This meant that Miller would really have to prove himself in the American Hockey League before getting his big shot in the NHL, which he was more than ready to do. Over the next 3 seasons with the Rochester Americans, Miller would average a .922 save percentage over 170 games, making 2 AHL All-Star appearances, and even winning the Baz Bastion Award for AHL Best Goaltender in the 2004-05 season, racking up 41 wins and 8 shutouts. With the NHL coming out of the lockout and Miller, now 25 years old, being the top goalie in the AHL, the Sabres were ready to give him his first real NHL workload in the 2005-06 season. He played 48 games this year, putting together a strong 30-14-3 record and a .914 save percentage, which was the highest on his team. He was also playing behind a very good Sabres squad with lots of depth throughout the lineup, and one that picked up 52 wins, which was then a franchise record for Buffalo. With Miller between the pipes, they'd beat the Flyers in round 1 in 6 games, and then beat Ottawa in round 2 with the gentleman's sweep. Things were looking good for the Sabres, but in the conference finals they faced off against the hot Carolina Hurricanes team, and although it was a back-and-forth battle that went 7 games, the Canes and their rookie goalie Cam Ward would win it and go on to beat the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup final as well. Miller and the Sabres were equally as good the next season, finishing the year first in the NHL in goals for, and again breaking their franchise record in wins, this time with 53. Ryan Miller had 40 of those wins and had a .911 save percentage, finishing 6th in the Vezina Trophy voting. Come playoff time, Miller and the Sabres took down both of their fellow New York foes in the Islanders and Rangers, but in the conference final they were outmatched by the Ottawa Senators, who'd get revenge on Buffalo in just 5 games. The next season, the Sabres would lose a few key offensive players, including Danny Briere and Chris Drury. They still had enough depth to be a top 5 goal-scoring team, but they struggled to keep pucks out of their own net and finished just outside the playoffs. Miller played in 76 of a possible 82 games, going 36-27-10 with a .906 save percentage. In the 2008-09 season, it was a similar story for Buffalo, and although they had slightly better defensive goaltending, their goal scoring was outside the top 10, and they'd again finished just a few points outside of a playoff spot. Ryan Miller was very strong this season, however, going 34-18-6 with a .918 save percentage and 5 shutouts. He finished top 10 among all goalies in saves, save percentage, goals saved above average, and goalie point shares. In the 2009-10 campaign, he had the best season of his career, helping lead the Sabres back into a playoff spot, going 41-18-8 with a .929 save percentage, which was 2nd in the league, a .222 goals against, also 2nd in the league, and he led the league in goals saved above average, helping him win his first Vezina Trophy. Miller was so good for Buffalo this year, he even finished 4th in the Hart Trophy vote. Not only did Miller have a standout NHL season, but he was also a star for Team USA during the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver. Miller completely stood on his head all tournament long, posting a .946 save percentage and 1.35 goals against average, leading the US all the way to the gold medal game before they were taken down in overtime by a goal from Canada's golden boy, Sidney Crosby. And although the US didn't quite bring home the top prize, Miller put on a show that people recognized all over the hockey world and likely inspired a generation of young American goalies with his performance in those games. He not only won top goaltender at those Olympics, but he was also the tournament MVP despite losing in the gold medal game. Come playoff time for the Sabres, they matched up against one of the top defensive teams in the league in Boston, and although Miller played strong, posting a .926 save percentage in 6 games, Tuukka Rask and the Bees were just a bit better than Buffalo in this series. The next 2 years, Miller put up very similar numbers, averaging 32 wins and a .916 save percentage, but the Sabres only made it to the postseason one of those seasons, losing to the Philadelphia Flyers in the first round in 2011. In the shortened 2012-13 season, Miller would play 40 of the 48 games for Buffalo, leading the NHL in both saves and shots faced that year. And while he was still playing well in the crease, the team around him was getting worse, and Buffalo finished the year last place in their division. Now at 33 years old and with only a few prime years left in his career, it was becoming clear that Ryan Miller wasn't going to be a Sabre for much longer. He played the first half of the season with Buffalo in 2013-14, posting really strong numbers on a pretty bad team, including a .923 save percentage. But by February, the Sabres traded Miller to the St. Louis Blues along with Steve Ott in exchange for goaltender Yaroslav Halak, Chris Stewart, Will Carrier, a 2015 first-rounder, and a 2016 third. The Blues were a top team this year, well-rounded with a chance to compete for a cup, but their goalie tandem of Brian Elliott and Jaro Halak was actually one of the top tandems league-wide before making this trade. And for whatever reason, it really didn't work out for Ryan Miller in St. Louis. He'd go 10-8-1 in his 19 regular season games with just a .903 save percentage, and then in the playoffs, he and the Blues would get taken down by division rivals, the Chicago Blackhawks, in 6 games, with Corey Crawford outplaying Miller. With Millsy being a free agent heading into the summer and the Canucks having just traded Roberto Luongo back to the Florida Panthers, Vancouver would sign the 34-year-old Miller to a 3-year, $18 million deal. In his first season with Vancouver, he would go 29-15-1 with a .911 save percentage and 2.53 goals against average, helping lead the Canucks back into the playoffs along with Eddie Lack. Come playoff time, they matched up against the Calgary Flames and would unfortunately be knocked out in 6 games. Both Miller and Lack split time in this series, but neither could quite get the job done. Each of the next 2 seasons with Vancouver, Miller played solid, putting up respectable numbers, but the team wasn't nearly good enough to make the playoffs, finishing 29th among 30 teams in goals for both of these seasons. Now 37 years old and a free agent again, Miller signed with the Anaheim Ducks, but this time to take on a new role as a backup behind the young American stud John Gibson. Miller and Gibson formed a dynamic duo in net, both finishing the year with save percentages over .926, giving up the 3rd fewest goals against in the league. But in the playoffs, they would unfortunately be swept by the San Jose Sharks, scoring just 4 goals in the series. Miller would play 3 more seasons backing up the Ducks and John Gibson, but they quickly became one of the worst teams in the league, finishing dead last in goals for in 2 of those 3 years. Miller would retire after the 2020-21 season at 40 years old with 391 career NHL wins, which was at the time of his retirement the most ever by an American-born goaltender. He's currently behind only Jonathan Quick. I think you could make the argument that Ryan Miller is the best American-born goalie of all time, and had he been on a few better teams and had some better luck throughout his career, he probably could have won a cup or 2 like Jonathan Quick, probably also another Vezina or 2. He will go down as one of the best netminders in Buffalo Sabres history and one of the great goalies of his generation. And if you really want to know just how good Ryan Miller was during the prime of his career, the fact that he's the only player ever to be named the best goalie in the NCAA, the American Hockey League, the National Hockey League, and the Olympic Winter Games tells you everything you need to know.